Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace, Dana Perino, host of The Daily Briefing and co-host of The Five, and Juan Williams, Fox News political analyst and co-host of The Five. Chris, it's interesting. We are so used to hearing from President Trump many, many times during the day, and usually making appearances as he comes and goes. He has been quiet, really, over the past 3 days. We understand that he's playing golf right now, but mostly we've just heard from his representatives who are out there trying to lay the groundwork for this case. Your thoughts?
Yeah, his silence has been very unusual and kind of deafening. Really, since election night, we just had that one very controversial speech in the White House briefing room when he said that the election had been stolen, talked about fraud, talked about conspiracies of big media, big money, and big tech. You know, I just want to go back to John Roberts and his report. I mean, it seems at this point that the Trump camp is filing and pushing the idea of lawsuits in search of evidence. Usually you have evidence of something and then you file a lawsuit. And you also had that clip that you ran of Rudy Giuliani where he said the burden isn't on us, the burden is on the vote counters, that their votes are legitimate. They're not going to be able to overturn this unless they have hard evidence of fraud. And as you guys have mentioned, fraud of a level that it would overturn the election. We're talking about tens of thousands of votes. You got to have evidence that there are people in a back room signing ballots, tens of thousands of ballots, and fraudulently and counting and then counting them. We've not seen no sign of that. And although there have been a couple of court cases about whether people can stand 20 feet away or 6 feet away, any cases on the merits of vote fraud, of illegally counted ballots or illegally cast ballots, whether it's in Georgia or Pennsylvania or Nevada, judges have just quickly thrown them out. You know, there is no evidence so far. Maybe there will be. And as you've all pointed out, the president has every right to pursue his legal options. But at this point, again, these are lawsuits in pursuit of any evidence. I mean, we even had a case where they're setting up hotlines in the White House. Call if you have evidence of fraud. That, when you're talking about tens of thousands of vote in at least 3 states, Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, that put the president over the top, you can bet they're going to get a lot of phone calls, but I can't imagine they're going to amount to very much.
And we've been looking into things that pop up on the internet, people send us, and it has not panned out. Okay, we're going to continue on that. I also want to talk about this race just historically, Juan. More than $8.4 billion spent on political ads. $8.4 billion this election cycle, by far surpassing any other election ever. Now we're getting ready, Juan, to go to a runoff with 2 Senate races down in Georgia, potentially with the balance of power in the Senate hanging on those 2 results. I mean, you could be talking about another $500 million just before January 5th in that race.
Right. Now, let's keep in mind that the Democrats feel a little chastened at this moment, Brett, because I think they spent $100 million in the South Carolina
You know, Anderson, there's not been a Republican over the last 4 years that did more to say that he was not that Trump was not doing a good job. Remember, I didn't go to the convention, the Republican convention, and then I spoke at the Democrat convention, and I've been very vocal about this. But I want to be clear. Now is the time for Democrats, and I believe Joe Biden will do this, to begin to listen to what the other half of the country has had to say. I think that the other half of the country, in many respects, has felt as though they have not been listened to. They feel stuck economically, and it's going to be up to the Democrats to listen. Things like perhaps improving the earned income tax credit for working families, to think about what we can do to fix their schools, to think about what we can do to give them access to the internet. There's so many things that can be done to talk to that part of the country. And remember, this is broken down sort of, Anderson, as an urban and country division. And it isn't good enough to just declare a great victory. And I'm very pleased that Biden's won. I put everything I had on the line well, not everything, but a lot of things on the line to do this. I'm pleased he's there. He needs to be a unifier, but we have to listen to what those folks, those Republicans, all across this country has had to say. And frankly, those Republicans have to understand what Democrats want to do, because if they want to improve health care, that doesn't mean they want Medicare for all. There is no socialism in Joe Biden. If all sides can begin to really listen and think, this country can be healed, in my opinion. Anderson, the best thing that's happened to Joe Biden is the fact that the United States Senate is either going to be Republican or very close, and it will allow Joe Biden to do what he does best. It allows him to govern as a moderate. It allows him to do the things that I've always hoped he can do, and the far left can push him as hard as they want. And frankly, the Democrats have to make it clear to the far left that they almost cost him this election. That people in this country are basically center, center-right, center-left. They're not far left, and they're also not far right. And we got to hope that the far right will act responsibly now that this election is over. But do I think it's possible that you can get something done on climate? Yes. Is it going to be, some new Green Deal? Of course not. But there's reasonable things that can be done. What can be done with taxes? Okay, if you're going to focus on any sort of a tax cut, it ought to be for the middle and the lower income people in this country. Are there things that can be done with infrastructure? For sure, but making sure broadband's available to everyone. I think those things can happen. Are there going to be fights? But yeah, there's probably going to be fights, but you will have incremental steps. And I've always said that this election in 2020 was not a big vote on ideology. This is sort of getting back to normal. The big debate will come in 2024, but that's a long way off, and today's the day that Biden's been declared as president. Well, I've known him a long time, and just a couple years ago, he and I sat on the stage. He invited me to the University of Delaware, and we had a couple hour time together speaking publicly, and spent a lot of time privately. And one of my dear friends was John McCain, who was one of his best friends. And I know what the guy's all about. And he is, when I say a throwback, I don't mean old. I mean a return to the fact that we need to communicate, we need to be patient, we don't need to demonize our opponents. Figure out a way to see the best in them. That's what I did throughout my entire career, and I resonate because I know that's what Joe has done. So I think actually he's in a better position today because being pulled from the left isn't going to work. They will not get those things done, and that congresswoman from Virginia warned the Democrats, you want to talk about defunding the police, you'll have no support. And I think this is an opportunity for Biden to talk about the center right and the center left of this country and what can be achieved. Because we have enormous problems with debt, Social Security, Medicare, health care. Little steps, little steps.
Well, it's really important for us here at the Pennsylvania Convention Center, where our election operations are centered, to remain focused on our job. The Philadelphia Police Department, the Philadelphia Sheriff's Office, and a constellation of other agencies have really kept us secure here so that nothing disrupts, nothing slows down or gets in the way of us certifying this election. On a personal level, I'm sure it's not easy for any of us here. There's a real disconnect between, the job that we're doing, which is a good thing. We just had the most transparent and secure election in the history of Philadelphia. And the people here work night and day to do our job to count those votes.
And I ask you this not just as a city commissioner, but as a Republican city commissioner, given where we are right now. What evidence of any widespread fraud have you seen in the count in Philadelphia?
I have not. If evidence of widespread fraud or evidence of any fraud at all is brought to our attention, we take a look at it and we refer it to law enforcement, as we always do in every election. I have seen the most fantastical things on social media, making completely ridiculous allegations that have no basis in fact at all, and see them spread. And I realize a lot of people are happy about this election, and a lot of people are not happy about this election. One thing I can't comprehend is how hungry people are to consume lies and to consume information that is not true.
What information is not true, to be clear?
Just the other day, I saw something that had it was a long list of people that they said were dead voters who voted in Philadelphia. So when we took a break between everything else that we're doing, we looked it up, each one of them, to see what their vote history was. Not a single one of them voted in Philadelphia after they died. It's one of these things that kind of bounces around out there, that echoes around, that people say from one to another. They heard something, or they heard from someone who saw something that they think might have been X, Y, or Z. And it's really impossible to keep up with those.
You shouldn't have to. Honestly, you shouldn't have to. It's like Bigfoot sightings. You shouldn't have to waste your time keeping up with stuff like that. Your time and your energy should be devoted in counting the votes. And from what you say, you've seen no evidence at all that anything untoward has happened in that process. So what's your expectation about what happens in Pennsylvania in the next 2 weeks? When do these votes from Philadelphia have to be certified, and what's your expectation for what happens then?
Well, my expectation is that Philadelphia County and all the other counties in Pennsylvania, complete counting the votes and report up to the Pennsylvania Department of State, I believe it's by November 23rd, what our certified election results are, so that Pennsylvania can certify this election.
And once that happens, it's done. And it means that the electors, when they meet on December 14th, will vote accordingly. Finally, and look, I don't want to put you in a tough position, and I have noted you are a Republican here, but you also don't live in a vacuum, and you know what's going on, and you know who is stirring the pot. The president and people who work for him are accusing people in Pennsylvania of widespread fraud, and they are the ones who are spreading this misinformation. So this morning, I want to give you a chance to speak directly to them. So what would you say to the president and those who work for him?
I think people should be mindful that there are bad actors who are lying to them. And they need to turn to people that they trust and to sources of information that they trust, and not rumors and not nonsense included in lawsuits or anything else like that, to make sure that they have confidence in this system and that their vote, regardless of who they voted for, is going to be counted.
Al Schmidt, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for talking to us. Thank you for the work you are doing. Please thank the people who are working with you as well, counting the votes. Appreciate it, sir.
But everybody's entitled, I think, to point out those irregularities and cases where people inappropriately voted. That's fine. I don't know that I've heard people say that the election was a fraud or that it was stolen. I mean, I think that would be, in my view, again, one, not accurate, and two, destructive to the cause of freedom. Because look, every nation in the world is looking at America and watching this election and seeing how we respond. And I think it's important that we show confidence in our institutions, our ability to investigate cases, as to take cases to the courts. And when that's completed, I think it's by far the most likely outcome that there will not be a change in the tally in a substantial way. And there will be a smooth transition of power. So I that's what I'm anticipating. I certainly hope that that's the message that we give to the world.